We do have two speakers today. We've got Helios's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Antonella Favit Van Pelt. And we also have Kevin Byrne with us, who is actually a veteran and PoNS user, and he will be sharing his story and his experience with PoNS as well.
Good afternoon, good evening, I should say, everyone, for those in the East Coast, and good afternoon for those in the West Coast. So thank you, Kevin, for joining us. I'm Antonella Favit Van Pelt, and I'm a neurologist. I am a specialist in neuromuscular movement disorders, and I see patients with rare neuromuscular disorders mostly. I am Helios Chief Medical Officer, and I've joined the company almost 4 years ago. And I've always been asked, why did you want to do work for Helios? Well, because I do believe that Helios can make difference in people's lives with our treatment. Now, often when you hear it from a sponsor, they're very optimistic. I said, oh, this is the best thing after sliced bread. And no, we're not the best thing after sliced bread, but we have a therapy that works through a very innovative mechanism of action. So it's very different than what you guys are accustomed to if you're affected by multiple sclerosis and if you're doing rehabilitation. So I'll be presenting, do a short presentation. I would be introducing you to the therapy, and then I will leave it to Kevin, who is an esteemed veteran, and he can tell you about his experience. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, and I hope you see. Sorry, I'm just gonna. All right, I am trying to. Okay, so here we go. All right, so PoNS is it's a therapy that promotes neuroplasticity, and I'm going to present the effect of therapy in people with multiple sclerosis. They're affected by gait and balance deficits. So the therapy has received the breakthrough designation by FDA in May of 2020. And then in March of 2021, we received the FDA marketing authorization, and we are the only medical device that is cleared in the United States for the indication of short-term treatment of gait deficit due to mild to moderate symptoms from multiple sclerosis, in adjunct to supervised therapeutic exercise in adult 25 to years of age, and is available by prescription only. So PoNS is an orally applied therapy that is delivered by neurostimulation that is achieved by putting a mouthpiece connected to a portable controller that promotes cranial nerve neuromodulation, meaning that it stimulates cranial nerves in your head, and stimulates it through delivering electrical stimulation to the tongue. So it consists of a lightweight portable controller that is horn-shaped that you wear around the neck. And then there is a mouthpiece that has 143 gold-plated electrodes. They are positioned to stimulate the anterior dorsal tongue, so the front part of your tongue, and you put it in your mouth and you hold it gently with your lips. So the mouthpiece sends this electrical stimulation to the nerve fibers that they are placed in the tongue, in the front part of the tongue, while you perform the exercises prescribed by your physical therapist that we'll talk about a little bit later. This stimulation promotes neuromodulation. So it basically sends signal to the brain and induces the brain to work, to in a certain sense, activates the brain. And I will show you later what areas of the brain it activates. When you use it consistently, regularly and consistent, so if you do your treatment regularly and consistent, then this neuromodulation turns into becoming, into neuroplasticity. What does it mean? It means that this neuromodulation, the activity that it produces in the brain, starts to consolidate, starts to become how the brain uses these areas to promote and to modulate the areas of the brain that regulate your gait function. So I just want to show you a little, detailed mechanism where you can appreciate where exactly in the brain and how, PoNS therapy, the stimulation through the tongue, lets you achieve this neuroplasticity.
The tongue is innervated by branches of the trigeminal and facial nerves with direct connections to the brainstem. Clinical evidence suggests that using PoNS therapy, PoNS device plus physical therapy, can induce neuromodulation effects by the translingual stimulation of the lingual nerve, a branch of the trigeminal nerve, and the chorda tympani, a branch of the facial nerve. This stimulation promotes specific activation of targeted nerve centers in the brainstem and cerebellum, which are associated with movement and balance. This process activates mechanisms responsible for neuromodulation of signaling pathways from and to specific areas of the cerebral cortex. Sustained neuromodulation by PoNS-induced activation of these cortical areas is likely to trigger, in these regions, a series of adaptive changes through a process known as neuroplasticity. The neuroplastic process is expected to rehabilitate existing pathways, as well as engage new mechanisms that can deliver functional signals to the spinal cord. Consistent and repeated application of PoNS therapy over 14 weeks is likely to consolidate these functional compensatory pathways and potentially lead to a sustainable functional improvement over the 14-week treatment period.
Okay, so how do people perform PoNS therapy? So you say, okay, I think I'm interested. I want to just to get the prescription. I want to go, and be treated with PoNS, right? So as I mentioned earlier, PoNS is used with physical therapy. So, and it's very easy to access. The therapy is initially, delivered by a physical therapist, or at least, on the first day, you bring the device to the physical therapist, and the physical therapist activates the device and works with you to put in place a training program, a physical therapy training program. So the therapist is going to assist you throughout the course of your therapy. But the time when you work more closely with the therapist is over the first 2 weeks, where you combine the utilization of PoNS with physical therapy in clinic and at home. After the first 2 weeks, you should be well prepared, and you should have already become very comfortable in using PoNS and performing your physical exercise, so that you could take it and use it independently at home with regular check-in with your physical therapist. It could be once a week, it could be twice a month. This is obviously important to check in with a physical therapist, because as every physical therapy training, the expectation is that you progress, you have a benefit, that you get better and better. So the physical therapist that can look at your progress and adjust, your exercise schedule. So the therapy is required, right? In order to be maximally effective, is required that you are perform it consistently. So one session of the therapy, so every time you use the therapy, every day you use the therapy, you should have a morning session, meaning that you should do 10 minutes of warm-up exercise. Then you will do 20 minutes wearing PoNS, right? So 10 minutes of warm-up without PoNS. Then you put 10 minutes wearing PoNS, 20 minutes wearing PoNS. And then while you're wearing the mouthpiece, you're going to perform the exercise that your trainer, your physical therapist, which is a PoNS trainer, because it's been registered to be a PoNS trainer, so it's been trained to become a PoNS trainer, assigns you to help with your balance. Then you take a little rest, and then you do another session of 20 minutes doing exercises that your therapist is assigning you to work on your gait deficit. Then you take a couple of minutes of rest, and then you sit down and you place your mouthpiece again. You activate your mouthpiece in your mouth for a breathing and awareness, meaning mindful technique, relaxation, technique of 20 minutes. Everyone is supposed to then repeat this in the afternoon. At that point, you really don't need the warm-up exercise because you've been working and walking and you've been active all day. So you can start with 20 minutes of PoNS. So you activate your PoNS and you put the mouthpiece in your mouth and you start with your balance exercises and with your gait exercises and with some movement control exercises. And then in the evening, you could do your breathing and awareness. So your mindfulness, your relaxation technique on your own, sitting on the couch, for 20 minutes. So what is important about PoNS? What's important about PoNS is that you need to make sure that you perform at least 100 minutes of therapy per day. So a recent study, which I will show a little bit in a little bit later, that is ongoing, but for which we have preliminary results, have shown that it is really important to adhere to this treatment schedule. So if you, on average, you should be able to do 100 minutes of therapy, meaning that you should be able, or you should, stay with at least 20 minutes of balance exercise and gait in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. Then you should do 20 minutes of gait training in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. And then you should do at least one mindful breathing and awareness training, so your relaxation, training. You could do it in the evening. So as long as you are consistently using it for about 100 minutes a day, obviously, if you could do all 120, the range is between 100 and 120, and that is important because by using it consistently, as you saw in the video for the mechanism of action, you basically start training your brain, and your brain is going to use those pathways that can help with rehabilitating your gait. So the therapy, PoNS therapy, has been shown to be safe and effective, and in 2 randomized controlled clinical trials, meaning that these are 2 trials where we used an active group and a placebo group. And we also have data that we have observed in real-world clinical utilization of PoNS therapy. So the first study showed that there was 100% improvement in a dynamic gait index scores. The dynamic gait index is an assessment that the physical therapists are doing to evaluate your gait and your balance. And in all the subjects that received, PoNS, so in all the active points, and patients who received active, they showed at least, a 4-point improvement in the DGI. But the average improvement for those who actually, were in the active group was almost 8 points. So this is, it's really important because it basically shows that adherence is, can lead to better performance. The other study is the Leonard study, which is the study that provides the data that show the activation of those brain areas that I've showed in the previous video. So this is the study that showed which area of the brain PoNS activates and which areas of the brains are responsible for the improvement that we see in people who do PoNS. And real world evidence, so evidence from folks that use the device in real in clinical practice, they show that 42% of patients treated in Canada, out of this 42, 58% of these patients had at least a 4-point improvement in the functional gait assessment, which is a similar assessment than DGI that therapists use to evaluate your progress with gait and balance. So as I was, telling before, I was telling you about the PoNS, the clinical study. So the clinical study that shows the two groups, so where we have basically everyone responding to the therapy, so 100% of response to the therapy, is showing that the from baseline to week 2, patients who are treated, and this is the time when they're treated in clinic and at home, so they do a session in clinic and a session at home, they have a clinically meaningful, clinically meaningful improvement, meaning that they already see a significant improvement in their gait deficit and balance, because balance is a function of gait, already at week 2. What's really important is look at what happens in the control group. In the control group, physical therapy gives us some improvement, right? So you guys have done physical therapy before, so you probably know that with your physical therapy you got a little, some improvement. You felt better. You had, better mobility. But what happens here is that over time, right? And then a week, between week 6 and week 8, you start to see the physical therapy gives you a little bit more of an improvement. And by week 10, you've got to the same improvement that folks with PoNS in the active treatment have gotten at week 2. But where it really gets, where it really gets important and meaningful is that between week 10 and week 14, right? You see that the people that were only treated with physical therapy and the sham, so an inactive device, they started to lose their improvement. So, and this is known already that over time, physical therapy does not give, much more benefit than what you already achieved, and sometimes it even declines. But what happens with PoNS? With PoNS, during the last 4 weeks of the treatment, you don't lose that improvement. Actually, you increase it a little bit more. So this is important because it means that by week 10, your brain has reached that neuroplasticity that you've seen in the slides before. And once neuroplasticity occurs, it's irreversible. So you don't lose it. So you maintain that effect for the 14 weeks. So the important thing is that this was a controlled, environment where everybody got 120 minutes of therapy, and we showed that with 120 minutes of therapy in this trial, 100% of the folks reached at least a 4 points improvement. So why am I stressing the importance of being compliant with the therapy? Because we have done a study recently that is still ongoing, is ongoing for the follow-up, meaning that we're going to look at the, what happens to people when they stop the treatment. But right now we have some preliminary results of a study that was done at 6 centers of excellence. And what we're looking for it is that we wanted to understand that what is the relationship between treatment compliance and therapeutic benefit over the 14 weeks period, and then obviously after the treatment, what happens in the 6 months that follow. So what we have found is that first and foremost, the study confirms that PoNS has a clinically meaningful benefit, and it also stresses the importance of treatment compliance. So what it showed is that treatment compliance was directly linked to the level of improvement, so the degree of improvement that you reach. So 50% of the participants that had an improvement, that had an adherence between 85 and 100%, meaning 100 to 120 minutes per day, they got the improvement in DGI of almost 7 points. Remember what I showed you in the Tyler studies, right? Folks who were compliant because they were done in a clinical setting, right? They got over 7 points improvement. And 74% of the participants who actually got 70% and above, so within the 70%, still had a meaningful improvement, though on average it was less. So if you do your therapy and you do it about 70%, so if you do between 80 and 100, 85 and 100 minutes, you do have an improvement of on average 4 points. But if you actually do it on, as recommended, you could get up to 7 points, if not more, of improvement. So this is really important because this is showing that the consistency of this treatment is related to the neuromodulation that occurs in your brain, and this neuromodulation then translate in changes in the brain that can lead to the improvement, and these changes, being irreversible, maintain that improvement. So the safety was, across the board in all the clinical trials and in our real world evidence, we have seen a very favorable safety and tolerability profile. There were no serious device-related AEs reported. All adverse events that we observed in clinical trials were mild. They were primarily related to increased salivation, headache, and fatigue. There were some interesting observation on the adverse events, especially in falls, right? So the number of adverse events, that reported falls were significantly lower in the active group, right? And also as well as the headaches were significant. The adverse events reporting for headaches was significantly lower in the in the control group. It was used. PoNS has been used in over 480 patients since 2019, and with more than 180,000 patient sessions that have been recorded. This is, just a screenshot of the safety. So there are some contraindication and there's some utilization with caution, but as you can see, overall, it's pretty safe. So now I wanted to introduce Kevin, and I leave it to him to tell you about his experience with the therapy, and I remain available to answer your questions either now or after. I would suggest after Kevin tells you about his experience. Thank you. You're mute, Kevin.
How's that? Can you hear me now? Great. Sorry about that. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. Thanks for the background information. It's wonderful. I'm going to talk a little bit about my MS experience and kind of go through that, and that's gonna put a personality on all these data and statistics that were just shared, and give you a little bit of a full understanding. You're going to recognize a lot of what I say as, yep, everyone's going to smile. Everyone in the MS community is going to smile and nod their head. But, yep, that happened to me, or yep, I know people that happened to as well. And then there's also going to be things that are different and unusual because, as you know, everyone with MS, every experience is different. Every experience is unique and unusual. So with that, let me just walk through my experience. My MS journey began 25 years ago. In 1999, I was an Army Aviation attack helicopter troop commander stationed in Korea. Numbness in fingers and toes, very typical sensations, experiences. But what happened was they moved up quickly up my right side into my chest, my neck, my head, and started to blur my vision on the right side. Everything was completely on the right side. I like to think this was something that went on for a long period of time, but I think it was more just a matter of a week to 10 days before I kind of raised the alarm. Here's something that's unusual. From the time I went to the doctor to the time I received my preliminary diagnosis of MS, 6 days. Part of it was I was put on a fast track. I think being overseas, being a pilot, being a commander. Went to my flight surgeon. He sent me to a neurologist. They sent me to get an MRI, and they said possible multiple sclerosis. Did some more testing after that to confirm everything, but that basically just in 6 days started my course down this path. They wanted to medevac me back to the United States. I kind of pushed back on that, and one of the other unusual things was they let me stay in command in Korea. I couldn't fly anymore, obviously, but I stayed there for another year. So that was another unusual thing. Issues progressed, issues changed, and everything. So a year later, they were going to send me back to the States. But what they did in the meantime was they put me on high dose steroids for something like 6 to 10 days. I can't remember, and then put me on Avonex and said, "Okay, well, if it gets worse, let me know." It got worse. I let them know, and in 2000 they sent me back to the States. Again, quick, chop. They processed me out and retired me from the Army rather quickly. And thinking about 3 months total from the time I was back. And then I just picked up my new life in corporate America. My symptoms were very mild. The steroids had reduced a lot of the initial exacerbation. So I had some numbness and tingling. My vision was back okay. But for the most part, I didn't look like I had MS. If everyone knows what that translates to. I rolled in my corporate life. I had several jobs that moved me around the U.S. I lived in Brussels, Belgium for a while, and came back here. Again, it was overlapsing remitting MS. It was difficult at times, but it didn't overtake my life completely. Had a few hospitalizations, several of them because of medication reactions, which may or may not be MS related, but it was because of MS I was on the medications. But it didn't overtake my life completely. Around 2013 was when I started to develop secondary progressive MS. It was a slow deterioration, this time of my left side. And, very typical symptoms, a lot of stumbling, a lot of tripping, slurring, weakness. It continued to progress until about 2017. It had progressed to the point that it affected my career. So what I did was I went on disability retirement, so retired for the second time in my life, and kind of put me on a new path. So I couldn't work anymore since I was on disability. So I couldn't do anything to earn income. I moved my disability benefits. So I moved into more of a retired nonprofit kind of lifestyle. I started our public charity, Never Stop, Never Quit, which is kind of the mantra that everything I do is built on. It was an Army concept that I first learned, where you really learn to respect your enemy, even admire them in their tenacity, their refusal to let up, and their refusal to slow down in their attack. Leads you to realize that you're not going to peacefully coexist. The only way there's going to be a good resolution for you is winning and being stronger. Being stronger, you have to win in order to be better. It's a matter of being stronger, having the resources, having the tenacity. So a lot of those concepts, a lot of those military concepts, almost translate directly into this battle with multiple sclerosis. It will not let up on us. It will not slow down. It will not back off. We can't peacefully coexist with it. So we just have to be better. We have to do things. We have to have the tenacity. We have to have the resources. We have to have the new technological developments and the new assets that we can use to employ in our battles against against our enemy, against multiple sclerosis. So that was one of those concepts that was in the back of my head before I knew about PoNS, but it was going to trigger me later on. So as I moved into this philanthropic kind of lifestyle, one of my other hobbies was writing, so I jumped into that full force. To date, I have published 7 books. 100% of the money goes to our public charity, which in turn goes to the organization we support. In this case, all of our support goes to the National MS Society and their efforts to fight MS and the debilitating effects of multiple sclerosis. So, all my writing, there's about 1.5 of the books that are about MS, but everything else is fiction. It was just a new life, a new adventure, a new journey for me. Even went back to school and got a master's degree in English and creative writing. So all these efforts turned into the fact that this was something I could do. This was something I could do to help support that fight against multiple sclerosis. To date, my charity, Never Stop, Never Quit, has raised about $850,000 in support of our fight against MS, and then when it's gone to the multiple sclerosis, has gone to the National MS Society, and they do a phenomenal job of dealing with those resources and pouring those resources into research, into treatments, into development, and all sorts of active efforts. Last June, I think it was last June, yeah, June of 2023, I was doing some research. Just even 23 years later, I still search the internet sometimes, try and find updates and things about MS. And I came across some articles about PoNS therapy. I was reading it, just kind of sounded interesting, and it sparked some familiarities to me. The fact that back in 2010, when I had severe degradation on my right side from the initial attacks, there was a need for me to do something about that. My daughter was born, and the fact that I couldn't even handle her because of my issues. And through the work that I did, and just the absolute necessity of it, it helped my mind and my brain kind of remap my nervous system. Was the best concept I could put towards it. And I still have my issues on the right side, but my mobility, my handling, all my conditions are much better. So I was kind of familiar with this concept of we can find ways to do the things we used to do before. The body will find ways to do that. That was the way I thought about it. And so I read some articles, and this PoNS is approved therapy, and it was approved by the FDA. So I reached out to the Veterans Administration, since I'm a patient with the VA. And they told me, nope, we don't support the PoNS treatment. And the main reason for that at the time was that they told me, the individuals I talked to, was the fact that we just don't have the resources and the commitment for the intense therapy and the intense time requirements, the regular consistent time requirements. So I still wanted to do this. I still had that never stop, never quit mentality. So what I did was I went to a neurologist outside of the VA, someone that I knew I've worked with in the past. I did a clinical trial with them years before that. I knew him through the MS Society, and he was familiar with PoNS and took me on as a patient for the time. And so he prescribed me, wrote a prescription for the PoNS treatment. And at the time, it wasn't covered. It wasn't covered by my insurance. He always had a wonderful program that could help offset some of the costs, and they did that. But I paid for it out of pocket because never stop, never quit. Got to do something about this. Got to employ the resources that we have that are available. So it took some time to get all that going, and probably about I guess around January or so of this year, I started the program, started a 14-week therapeutic program with PoNS. Um, it was, as the doctor explained, it was something that was, some new, unique, different. It's a time commitment. Um, it's something that I had to go into it beforehand saying, yep, I'm going to do it. Even though I didn't have any of these webinars, all I had was what I read on the internet. I didn't really understand a lot about PoNS. My expectations were different and they were reset rather quickly in the program. But I understood that there is a time commitment, an absolute time commitment. It has to be employed. It has to be done. So my neurologist set me up with a physical therapist, and she got her training with Helios on the device, and then we sat down and learned how to do this together. One difficult thing for me at that time, and a lot of MS patients probably realize this, is I don't like physical therapists. I don't like them because the ones I've worked with in the past will have me do things that, okay, I don't need to do that basic cookie cutter exercises. I have unique requirements. I can do this much better, or I can't do these at all. And it just turned into situations where they couldn't offer me the benefit that I could gain by doing stuff myself. I was doing a lot of physical therapy on my own. I've had several physical therapists tell me that I can't do anything better than what you're doing right now. We just don't have the resource. We don't have the time. And in reality, they didn't have the interest in trying to come up with something unique for one individual. The nice thing about the PoNS program was it is a very standard structured program, but it is so unique in its efficacy and its focus that it's not just an off the shelf, hey, everyone can do this. You have to fit the mold. You have to work within these standards to achieve what those goals are. So I did my 14 weeks, and it was very annoying sometimes having to do my PoNS therapy twice a day, and having to stop everything I'm doing for my PoNS therapy. But it was a necessary evil, and I'm happy to say, I know, like the doctor said, we do at least 80% of the program. I'm happy to say that I'm confident that I did 100% of the program each time. The army mentality in me says you've got to do that. That's your job. That's your orders. So you do what you have to do. So I did the program, and I saw some initial very quick changes, and I was excited about that. Um, had to have my expectations reset because I went into the program thinking, okay, I'm going to do this PoNS program, and then in 2, 3, 4 weeks, I won't need to walk with my brace, my AFO anymore. I'll probably never need a cane again. This is going to be great. I'll be fine. I'll be out running. Well, that's not what the goal of the program is to do. The goal of the program is not to make you like you were before. It's to provide those incremental improvements. Um, so that was something that I had to reset my expectations on. And once I did, I began to appreciate those incremental improvements in my walking ability, my gait, my balance. Those are the areas that we worked on with the physical therapists on that regular basis. What I worked on at home, and I saw the benefits. I actually and some of the individuals that work with Helios have seen. I recorded videos of me all the time doing it. So you saw what those improvements were on week 1, all the way through week 14, and you saw where I excelled in some areas and where I just, okay, that's as good as you're going to get, kind of deal. So I finished my PoNS therapy, and it gave me a new lease on what I can do. And I went with my then 13-year-old daughter. We went to New York City. I walked all the way up and down New York City for 4 days, and was able to do everything. Was able to accomplish everything. I was finally able to get back into doing some of the regimental things that I was doing, some of the physical therapy and physical exercise things that I was doing in the past, because my balance was better, my gait was better, my mobility was. So that was great. Since that time, unfortunately, my MS has progressed, and it's continuing to progress to the point that it's a lot of this stuff is significantly degraded on my left side, my left arm, and the atrophy that's taken over my left side of my body is really significant to this day. I'm sure everyone listening to me wonders how many drinks I had, because I sound like a drunken sailor, but it's just something that has progressively gotten worse and will get worse. My walking, my gait has not declined to the extent it actually has not declined at all compared to how everything else on my left side has. So that's been my biggest notice, and the thing I really appreciated the most. That appreciation kicked in almost a year and a half after I completed my PoNS therapy, when I was reviewing everything, and I was talking to my doctor about the degradation of my issues and increasing health issues, but the fact that my gait has not declined. I'm able to do a lot of the things that I want to, which is important. My 14-year-old daughter really deserves a dad who can have the mobility to. I'm not going to be able to keep up with her. Shoot, no one's going to be able to keep up with her. But to stay and to do those things, we are this weekend. We are going to flying to Salt Lake City. On there Saturday, going to see Sabrina Carpenter in concert that night, and fly back on Sunday. And the fact that I can do all that, and there's no concern about me not having the mobility, not having to just stop what I'm doing, because I can do that stuff now, is huge in terms of the quality of my life. So what do I do now? I continue my philanthropic efforts, my nonprofit efforts, continue working through my charitable organization, continue working with the National MS Society. I'm back with the VA, and I continue my own physical therapy. I have not had any additional PoNS therapy. So this is one of those things that, okay, well, as far as the walking and the gait, I'm comfortable to where I'm at, the improvements that I've achieved, that I've the points I've reached in terms of my balance and my mobility, and my lifestyle has been modified, built around them, and I'm not concerned about them getting worse tomorrow or the next day, like I am with everything else with my MS, as I'm sure patients with MS kind of notice and realize and think about every day. Doc, that's kind of my story. Do we want to open up for any questions, or?
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And as Kevin had mentioned, anybody has any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat. If you are unable to access the chat, if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat, and we'll take any questions now.